Father, could you tell us what is being filed today and read the letter, the cover letter of this petition?
Thank you very much. Of course, my name is Reverend Father Dr. Augustine Odimegwa. We're here today to submit to the office of the President this Magnitsky Act that we are holding a couple of our judges and attorney generals responsible for the continued incarceration of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu in solitary confinement without trial, without due trial. The White House. 3. American Veterans of Igbo Descent, AVID, Rising Sun Charities Organization, and Ambassadors for Self-Determination, submission against Nigerian jurists and the former Attorney General for sanctions under the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act, 22 USC. Dear Mr. President, of course, reading on behalf of Bruce Fine, representing American Veterans of Igbo Descent, Rising Sun Charities Organization, and Ambassadors for Self-Determination. All three are non-profit organizations substantially dedicated to monitoring gross violations of internationally recognized human rights, especially in Nigeria. Pursuant to the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act, 22 USC and EO 13818, the three non-profit organizations urge Magnitsky sanctions against a quintet of Nigerian judges implicated in the persecution of Biafran leader Mazi Nnamdi Kanu for exercising his rights to free speech and association and a fair trial. The names include Justice Binta Murtala Nyaku, Justice Harma Simon Samani, Justice Harma Akawa Barka, and Justice Mohammed Lawal Garba, and former Chief Justice of Nigeria Olukayode Ariwola. They also seek Magnitsky sanctions against former Attorney General Malam Abubakar Malami. The violations include ongoing arbitrary detention as determined by the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, denial of the right to fair trial, judicial endorsement of Mr. Kanu's kidnapping, torture and extraordinary rendition from Kenya to Nigeria. Nigeria's protracted persecution of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu for peaceful advocacy of a self-determination referendum in Biafra commenced as early as 2015. In September 2017, Nigeria's military attempted to assassinate Mazi Nnamdi Kanu in his hometown. Many were murdered, but he managed to escape by a miracle. In June 2021, Mr. Kanu was kidnapped and tortured by Nigerian authorities in Nairobi, Kenya, followed by extraordinary rendition to Abuja, Nigeria. He has been detained in solitary confinement without trial and without proper access to lawyers ever since. The United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention found on July 20, 2022 that Mazi Nnamdi Kanu's detention violated 16 international human rights covenants. It ordered his immediate and unconditional release and the reparations paid. Nigeria has flouted the working group decision for more than 3 years now. On October 26, 2022, the Federal High Court Umuahia declared Mr. Kanu extraordinary rendition unlawful and unconstitutional and awarded damages to him. On December 15, 2023, the Supreme Court of Nigeria, while acknowledging the Nigerian government's extraordinary rendition of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu as criminal, nevertheless decreed that the fruits of its crime, his detention and persecution, were legal.
Bruce, could you tell us about the severity of the violations of justice? I mean, just how gross of an injustice is this, and where did they go off the rails in regards to how they treat Mazi Nnamdi Kanu?
Well, a few pages of history often speaks volumes of logic here. The persecution really began even before the more recent kidnapping and torture in 2021. As far back as September in 2017, there's attempted assassination through the military to kill Nnamdi and his family and friends. Nnamdi escaped by a miracle. His friends, many of them were killed. And all of this is in violation of the international human right to seek self-determination. Indeed, that right was announced almost 250 years ago in our American Declaration of Independence. The right to government by the consent of the governed. A right that every group enjoys around the world. It wasn't limited to the United States. And the fact is that the Biafrans never joined Nigeria. They were forced at the point of machine guns by the British in 1914 to amalgamate with other portions of Nigeria. But there wasn't any vote, and so there's no need to secede from an organization you never joined. And Nnamdi Kanu has been persecuted mercilessly by the Nigerian government for seeking to defend this right. Now, if we want to compare the persecution with others, Nelson Mandela is a nice benchmark. If you read his memoirs, on Robben Island when he was detained, he lived in a paradise compared to Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. He wasn't in solitary confinement. He actually taught and learned from universities with other inmates there. They had games. There wasn't anything like solitary confinement. He had access to lawyers. Mazi Nnamdi Kanu does not. He doesn't even have access to me. I've been 6 times. They say, no, Mr. Fine, you can't visit with him. Even the persons who visit with him, they can't take in any pencils, no papers. Everything is recorded. Everything is videoed. There's no privacy whatsoever. So again, if we want to take a comparison with Nelson Mandela, who ended up being not only a Nobel Peace Prize winner, but an international hero, he suffered far more grotesquely. And it's continuing to this very day after 4 years. Now, I'd like to amplify for our audience here as well, the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act empowers the President to identify foreigners who are guilty of gross violations of human rights, freeze their assets, and ban them from ever traveling to the United States. And that's what we're asking happen in this particular case with regard to the 6 individuals that we identified in our petition. Now, one of the other elements that comes from the Global Magnitsky listing is it's a stigma. It puts you in the same category as notorious, horrible human rights violators, Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Kim Il-sung in North Korea, anyway, all the ones that you remember by reading in the newspapers. And we would hope that the Nigerians would wake up. This is simply the opening shot, if you will, of trying to obtain justice for Nnamdi Kanu. If others do not shape up and help and insist on his release, they will be on the list that we present to President Trump as well. And that ought to be a message that goes out to everyone in Nigeria who's been involved in this complete travesty of justice against Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. You will be our next petition if within the next short while Nnamdi Kanu is not free as he deserves to be under international law.
Bruce, can you expound on the teeth that are in the Magnitsky Act and just how deep can they go to both the individual and the country?
Well, the individuals can be banned from ever visiting the United States. They can't do business here. If they have any assets, they will be frozen. But the United States also can, under Magnitsky and related laws, impose embargoes. They can cut off, they can impose tariffs. We know Mr. Trump might slap 500% tariff on Nigeria in order to encourage them to release Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. They're almost a limitless array of sanctions, if you will. They could they could cut off all military supplies, which right now Nigeria is quite dependent upon the United States for a military supply. They should prevent them from getting access to World Bank loans or IMF loans. So there's a huge arsenal that the President of the United States wields to pressure Nigeria to doing the right thing. We don't want to go that way. Mr. Trump doesn't want to take the Nigerian people, who oftentimes suffer with the sanctions, down with the leaders. But after all, the leaders and the acquiescence of the people, especially the Fulani, are responsible for the plight of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, and they need to take risks themselves in order to do the right thing. To say, well, I don't want to take a risk, the government will retaliate. Well, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu took a risk far greater than anybody's asking you to take. It's time to be accountable for your own country and your own compliance with international law, and push back against the government of Nigeria that, again, has acted in dastardly criminal fashion for at least 40 years. And I want to underscore, what the government did is a crime. Think of this obtuseness. Nnamdi Kanu is being prosecuted by the criminal organization that captured and prosecuted him. It's the government should be prosecuted by Nnamdi Kanu, not the other way around. And when that happens, we know that justice will have prevailed.
Does the president have the power to actually punish countries doing business with Nigeria? I mean, how far do those teeth go?
No, I mean, we can see right now with regard to the use of the tariffs.
Yes.
If you call tariffs, punitive tariffs, 100, 200%, the answer is yes. The president does have that authority under emergency powers and existing sanctions that Congress has allocated to the executive branch to do those things. But I don't believe in this particular situation, Mark, there really is much space between the president and Congress. Congress also of the United States is very, very critical of Nigeria. The chairman of the House Foreign Relations Committee, Chris Smith, has been a bitter critic of Nigeria for long years. And Congress could do something like expel Nigeria from the United Nations. That was done in a similar way with suspension. During the period of apartheid in South Africa, the United Nations suspended South Africa until it abandoned apartheid after Nelson Mandela was released. It was suspended for over 2 decades. That sanction is looking Nigeria in the face right now. That you continue to defy international human rights, you're not worthy of sitting in the United Nations anymore. And think of this kind of oddity. It was the United Nations Working Group that said Nnamdi is being held in violation of 16 international human rights covenants and orders his immediate and unconditional release. It is an arm of the United Nations. So how can Nigeria be part of an organization which is flouting at the same time? It just doesn't compute. And again, we hope that Nigerians will get control of themselves. There's a way in which you can use peaceful avenues of redress, separation. It doesn't need to be violent. It's happened in Czechoslovakia divided. It happened when Sudan divided. It's been done before. They need to get the negotiating table with Mazi Nnamdi Kanu so that everybody can be a winner. If it's not, we risk everybody being a loser.
As an attorney, one last thing. Bruce, if you could expound on the difference of how they captured Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. Was it more of an arrest or a kidnapping?
No, this was a kidnapping out and out. He's driving to the airport in Nairobi. They kidnap him, take him to secret premises, torture him for 8 days, then stick him in a private plane to go back to Abuja. That is kidnapping by any other name. Moreover, the Nigerian courts themselves have acknowledged the kidnapping but said, well, it doesn't really matter. You can prosecute the fruits of your kidnapping, which runs contrary to all law. That is, a fundamental rule from the beginning of time is you shouldn't let crime pay. Well, what's happened here is the Nigerian courts has told the government, you can make crime pay. You can engage in crime to capture somebody and then keep them and prosecute them and put them in prison. That really turns justice upside down.
Yeah. What is the maximum that is allowed for solitary confinement, and then we can talk about what's happening here.
Well, it's very limited. Solitary confinement, in case of emergent circumstances, might be necessary when you have an uprising and you need to isolate someone temporarily to quell some kind of rebellion or insurrection. But beyond that, solitary confinement is absolutely prohibited. In the United States, it's generally prohibited with regard to our own prisoners. Why would you need solitary confinement? And then there was a risk that he's going to foment rebellion with other inmates, but there's none of that here whatsoever. And moreover, there was never 1 second where Nnamdi Kanu was outside of solitary confinement. That is, there was never any evidence that putting him in inmates that were in regular operation of a prison system would create any problem whatsoever. They stuck him in there for a simple reason. They wanted to make sure his influence, his valor did not rub off on anybody else. That's all it was. And it's clearly another reason why he's being detained in violation of international human rights covenants. And again, I want to go back to Nelson Mandela, because he's kind of the benchmark for what was supposed to be a horrible, horrible treatment. He lived in paradise compared to Nnamdi Kanu. He was not in solitary confinement. He took courses online, he taught courses online and with other inmates, and engaged in sporting activities. All of that being denied to Nnamdi.
Is it true that solitary confinement, if used, is limited to a certain period of time, and what is that time?
Well, the time is where it's necessary. If you have some kind of uprising, you'd say, we need to put people in solitary confinement because they've been engaged in, say, internecine warfare, they're killing each other, they're hurting each other.
Yeah.
So it's like if you have two kids, brothers, sisters, they're fighting each other, okay, you stick them in their separate rooms for a certain period, they cool off.
I heard 15 days was the maximum.
Yeah.
That was
well,
allowed by
I don't know whether there's
humanitarian
arbitrary. 15 days could be too long, depending upon the circumstances, for somebody is in need of emergent care. No, 15 days could be too long. It's by all the circumstances, but 15 days is a benchmark.
Yes. All right. Could you tell us about his health? On the one side, physically, I've heard horrible things, but psychologically, how is he doing? And then if you could expound on physically how he's doing.
Yeah, Mark, thank you so much for that question. I just came back from Abuja. I was there visiting him on almost 3 times a week on daily basis. His health is failing, and he needs immediate medical attention. But I want to say this to my brothers and sisters over there. Nnamdi Kanu is not your problem. If anything, he's the solution. So the people that think that they are benefiting from keeping him and try to kill him, basically that's what it is, just like Father just said and Bruce said. You can't keep somebody for that long. It's just God that is holding on to his health. They need to give him the best medical attention, fly him out to maybe United States to be checked out and make sure that he's alive. That is something they need to do. Nobody should be begging them for that. They have not achieved anything by keeping him there. If anything, things have deteriorated in the southeast region. Things were not so 4 years ago. For the hatred of the late president had on the Igbos should not be extended. The elites of the Fulanis need to come together and know that this thing that they're having against the Igbos need to stop.
My name is Dr. Ozo Eric Chukwu, member of AVID, American veteran of Igbo descent. I am addressing the issue where Kenyan government that helped Nigeria kidnap Nnamdi Kanu has agreed to their error, and they have awarded him token reparation for what they did, and they have asked Nigeria to unconditionally release him. So if Kenya that helped them now understand that they made a mistake, Nigeria has no footing to continue to keep Nnamdi Kanu under detention and inhuman torture and punishment.
This document contains the details of all the atrocities committed by these judges.